For the last 100 years, in education, we've tried to use technology to help students see the world in a different way. Yet it's always been inside the classroom, and we've never been able to take them outside the classroom unless they use their imagination. And it hasn't changed. But what if I told you that you can take your students somewhere different without having to leave your classroom? What if I told you that you can visit the Galapagos Island and watch the blue boobies as Charles Darwin did aboard the Beagle, and even visit the Galapagos National Park and the Galapagos Marine Reserve? What about watching the moon as it orbits around the Earth and watching the globe disappear into the vastness of space as Juno goes from the Earth's atmosphere all the way into deep space and eventually into Jupiter and orbiting around its moons? While this may sound as something coming off a Star Trek episode from the holodeck, it's actually pretty real. It's Google Expeditions, taking your students away from just the classroom experience and into various other destinations. Google Expeditions is relatively affordable, and it already uses materials that are either way going to be used in your classroom, such as cell phones. So instead of just having students use their cell phones for texting and sharing their latest Snapchat stories, use it to download the Google Expedition that is available in the Android store and in the Apple store. Other than that, the only other thing you need is the Google Cardboard, which can be bought for $10 in your local Walmart, or you can buy it off Amazon for the prices shown here. As a teacher, you would need, though, a tablet so that you can control all the expeditions you're going to do and point them in the right direction wherever they get lost. From the research I've been able to collect on Google Expeditions and the reviews I've read from teachers and news outlets, is that it's a really fun app, and people love to use it. Students enjoy them, teachers enjoy them, and since it's so easily to fund, then it becomes an essential tool or a really good tool to use in the classroom. Yet you're not going to see a hologram of Benjamin Franklin popping up and teaching the class for you. So in essence, Google Expedition just becomes another tool for you to use, just like your textbook, your projector, and any other tool that you use regularly in your classroom. So Google Expedition doesn't necessarily substitute any of your other tools in the classroom. It's just an enhanced version of your textbook that allows you to show more than just pictures and show a way for your students and you to become immersed in the experience and become immersed in the setting. So for example, I traveled to Stonehenge and I wasn't able to smell Stonehenge, I was just able to see it, but I had a full 360 view of Stonehenge and how it is designed, how those pillars are positioned, and it made me realize, or it made me put two and two together. What the textbook is saying was what videos I've seen on the internet, and see how they're actually unified in a single location. While I was viewing Stonehenge, my girlfriend was able to instruct me and point me in the direction of various interesting locations, which is something that the Google Expedition app already has in the teacher feature. So while you are teaching, you will also have the option of highlighting certain areas, and those areas, when you're seeing it as a student, will just highlight and an arrow will come out and will force you or will guide you toward that location. On the teacher's side, you are able to have not only a brief explanation of what that focus point is, but you will also have three types of questions: easy, medium, and advanced questions for your students, depending on what grade level they're on, and also depending on what you have discussed in class. So you have a good balance between having a technology that not only provides interesting facts, but also can give you questions to foment class discussion, depending on how far you have gotten in the teaching process of your students. After visiting Stonehenge, I visited the human body and was able to see human tissues and organs in their full splendor. and was able to interact with a few interesting locations inside lungs, inside livers, and other major organs. And something that Google Expeditions brought that I thought was very, very interesting was the fact that you can compare side by side healthy tissues along with damaged tissues, such as healthy lungs versus those that have been corrupted by smoking, and healthy livers versus those that have suffered through alcohol abuse. So, in a health classroom, you can definitely use Google Expeditions to compare healthy tissues versus those that have been damaged over time and through various sicknesses and illnesses. A constant issue across all teacher education programs is the fact that teachers or pre-service teachers are not exposed to as much diversity as the classroom that they are going to teach in. And something that Google Expeditions can do to help is take those students into a different cultural location, which is a very important part of culture. Culture is not just the people and what they eat. A large part of what someone's culture is their location and where they grew up. Another interesting element that Google Expedition provides is the historical element, in which many of the locations that Google Expedition has are locations of protest. So, for example, if you're discussing the women's rights and the LGBT protests that have gone on in New York, you have at least 20 locations, 10 for each, where you can visit and explore what happened in each location, what was the reaction of the people, and how did this lead into the creation or into the protest for women's rights or for LGBT rights in the state of New York. There are various limitations for Google Expeditions. First and foremost, the fact that it is only a 360 view of the location. So, for example, students cannot really interact with the setting that they're in. They can only view what's happening at that specific location for a certain amount of time. That doesn't mean that the location is evolving either. So you're just looking, in essence, at a 360 video or a 360 picture of a location that does have its interesting features, but it does not let you pick up if you're, for example, in a restaurant, it does not let you pick up a cup. It doesn't let you sit down. It doesn't let you move from a fixed point, which is really something that I believe can be corrected once some VR technology, some virtual reality technology makes its way into the classroom, such as some handheld devices, so that you can have hands in Google Expeditions. Another limitation is that currently the amount of locations is very limited. So, for example, in Los Angeles, you only have the UCLA location, and you don't have a location for Puerto Rico at all. And in the Caribbean, you only have Argentina, which is technically not the Caribbean, it's South America, and also Mexico, which technically is Caribbean, but you don't have a Caribbean island. You don't have Jamaica, you don't have Dominican Republic, Haiti, and other locations that would be interesting in case you were trying to create a type of travel abroad scenario with Google Expeditions, which is something that is strongly encouraged. Google Expedition is also highly dependent on Wi-Fi technology, so every single student and teacher needs to be connected to the same Wi-Fi router, regardless if they have an independent wireless connection. So if a student has internet connection but cannot connect to the Wi-Fi in the school, then they will not be able to interact with the rest of the students or participate in the expedition with the teachers. And additionally, it becomes a problem when your routers are shared among many classrooms. So, for example, if your internet connection or if your internet router is shared within the entire school, any student can jump into your expedition, or any number of factors can happen where people outside your classroom are in your expedition, and vice versa. Your students can get lost and become part of another teacher's interaction and our teacher's expedition, which is unfortunate, but I think, again, it can be remedied once Google Expeditions has a 1 year or 2 years under its belt working in schools directly. One large limitation I see to Google Expeditions, which is related back to a discussion we had in class, is using it in low socioeconomic locations, specifically in schools where students cannot afford smartphones. You do need a very powerful smartphone not just to interact with the internet, and the router that is going to have a lot of devices connected, making it slower and slower. The device must also have enough storage to store each expedition for each class, so it will require large amounts of data for it to be available and ready to pull up at any moment. And I don't know if every student or all 20 students will be able to have access to such a smartphone and that amount of technology. And in addition, those smartphones need to be kept up to date, so students will be required to have the latest version of their iOS devices or their Android devices, and of course the latest versions of the app. That even though they are free, they do need a location for them to update and have everything ready. When talking about Google Expeditions and the entire virtual reality wave that we're riding, we need to understand that this technology is in its infancy. It has been around commercially for probably 4 or 5 years, and this technology is not exactly designed for education. This is something that Google is trying to incorporate into its Google Classroom functions. This technology is basically designed for gamers, and that is why gamers have a little bit more advanced technology that is way more pricier, since each unit is above $500, and it's more sensitive, where the unit is easier to buy a new one than to have it fixed. But overall, I think Google Expeditions is a great tool to have in your classroom, and like I've said earlier, even though it has very limited locations, it's also very important to understand that Google has only been around, or has only been working with this project for around a year. So additional locations and more updates are constantly coming out, for better or for worse, and are opening up the world for a whole lot of teachers and a whole lot of classrooms. And I believe that with each new update, and as the technology becomes itself cheaper and easier to integrate into the classrooms, we will have more interactions with these locations, where we will be able to walk around the museum, probably interact with the sign, interact with various other instruments that could be around the International Space Station or your NASA trips. So I believe that we need to give this technology time. And in the day and age in which we live, I know that that is something really hard to expect, but I believe in virtual reality. I think that it can eventually turn into the joke I referenced earlier in my presentation, into a holodeck, where we're not just using our vision, but we're also using our ears, using our touch, using our different senses to interact with the setting that we are pushed into, and not necessarily traveling to. My final thought on Google Expedition is that you should all try it, and you should all see how it evolves your classroom and how you could probably use it within the different levels that you teach it. Something that I want to try out is to see how my pre-service teachers will play around with it, see where they're interested in heading, and how would they use it in their own classrooms. Maybe you could all tell me how your third graders, fourth graders, your middle schoolers, or high schoolers interacted with this technology, because I think that they will find it very, very peculiar, and they will find some way of making it worthwhile.